Good morning. My name is Kathy Carver, and I get the honor of being Mary's co-presenter today. So we appreciate you being here today. I'm a physical therapist for 23 years. I work at the University of Alabama at Birmingham in the wheelchair and seating clinic, work part-time, and I also get the honor of being the new executive director for the clinician task force. So we are glad to be with you today, and I look forward to spending time with you and discussing the need for people who need power assist products and which one should they use. So we're going to get started today. And our first, of course, disclaimer is neither one of us have any kind of disclosures to let you know about today. And here's what we hope to accomplish. We want to talk to you today about some objective evaluation measures that you can use to help make your decision, but also justify the need for the equipment you're recommending. We're going to go through the various products that are out there and compare and contrast those and give you the ins and outs of which one might be a best fit for your client. And then talk at the end a little bit about the medical justifications you can use to when you're documenting. And we have a couple of cases to share with you as well. So we want to start with just laying a foundation of what is the problem. The bottom line problem that people that come to see us with is pain, right? Upper extremity pain, elbows, shoulders, and wrists. And we all know that there's a lot of research already out there that indicates that this is a big need and it's a big issue for people who push for even after 1 year. And there's a variety of ways we can treat that pain. Therapy, we can do medications, some people it results in surgeries. And we can also back up a little bit though and look at the fit of the wheelchair. We can also back up even further and look at those mechanics of how people push, looking at their stroke frequency and how much each extremity is pushing and what their techniques are. But our overall goal is to protect those joints and to facilitate healing and reduce the risk of further injury. So the risk factors, just again laying our foundation, any individual who uses a manual wheelchair as their primary means of getting around, a variety of people do this. It's not just people with paralysis, paraplegia, or quadriplegia, but there are a variety of people that have to push in a variety of categories. And some even come into their need for a wheelchair with a previous history of shoulder trauma. We've all had incidences where people end up in our clinics and they've been in a poorly fit wheelchair for a number of years that led to that trauma to their upper extremities. Their postural alignment can also impact their knee, impact their shoulder pain, and then just kind of the way their bodies were made. Long arms, short trunks, also can make the manual wheelchair propulsion inefficient and then result in shoulder dysfunction. This slide is one of my favorites because it humbles me, and I hope it humbles you and shows you that there is a lot going on in the upper extremity while someone is pushing. Well, I read several studies, and at least two of them agree on all of these are in, like I say in Alabama, hot motion during that the push phase and the recovery phase of manual wheelchair propulsion. So I show you this to hopefully do what it did to me, was to kind of wake me up on what all was going on in the upper extremity and what I needed to pay closer attention to in my evaluation. So the takeaway we want you to have at this point is, based on the studies that we don't have time to dig into today, is that the supraspinatus is very active in both phases of manual wheelchair propulsion, the initial contact phase and then that recovery phase. The infraspinatus contributed more hand rim power than any other muscle. And we remember one of our risk factors was that initial contact, that trauma and the increased frequency, so that infraspinatus is getting a lot of action. The deltoids, biceps, and triceps are both active in both phases. And those push phase muscles are way more concerning because they're doing that concentric contraction. And there is a lot of co-contraction going on to provide stability during that motion. So that lays our foundation for what are we going to do about the need for reducing the risk of repetitive strain injury, and then what do we do once it's happened. So I want to remind you about this resource that's out there, the Preservation of Upper Limb Function Following Spinal Cord Injury, put out by the PVA. Produced by the Consortium of Spinal Cord Medicine. And it's just a great document to have at your fingertips that provides you a lot of evidence-based information about preserving upper limb function, the clinical practice guidelines. The other hat that I wear is I'm a medical reviewer for our state Medicaid. So I get to look at a lot of pricing and comparison and read a lot of documentation. And that begged the question when PowerAssist products came out and the cost of them is, so why not just go to a full power chair once you start looking at pricing and function? And some of the answers to that are just accessibility. Someone's in physical environment may not be accessible for a power chair, and their home environment may not be conducive to it, as well as need for transportation. And then it seems like the more I'm in practice and the more we talk to people about their needs is, what about their need for power functions? So can someone still remain independent at the manual wheelchair level, just needing that push assist? Or are they now at the point where their upper extremities are so weak and so impaired that they no longer can do a pressure relief or adjust their position for comfort? So just these questions to ask as you're thinking about what's the best product for my end user. So Mary's going to take it from here and talk a little bit about, oh, I'm sorry, that's in just a minute, apologize. Humanity here. Anyway, so if the power wheelchair itself is not the direction you want to go, there is that in-between category of PowerAssist products. Just a neat study we wanted to share with you that indicated the EMG studies of which of these muscles were highly active, and just want to remind you about that slide that was humbling that had all the 20 plus muscles on it. It did verify that the EMG studies did that the intensity and duration of the pec major, anterior deltoid, and infraspinatus were very active, and then again the supraspinatus. So I hope you're beginning to think about those muscles as you think, I really should be evaluating and tuning into a detailed muscle test of my evaluation of those key muscles. So who would benefit? Depending on how your clinics are run and how you handle referrals, what began to happen is, and these products were available on the internet. People would YouTube them and go, I want one of those, I need one of those. I want to get one of those like right now. So it made us back up and say who would really benefit from this? Those people who have upper extremity pain, weakness, their body types, maybe low endurance, still able to do a pressure relief, and they're just not interested in a power chair at the time. And individuals who are not able to really propel that ultralight wheelchair functionally all day, every day. And this led to the development of a screening tool that I wanted to share with you that I go through with people before they come into the appointment if this is their primary need or reason for referral. And potentially like some of your clinics that people may drive and fight for a parking place and want to make sure that that's an effective visit. So this is a tool we developed. So I'll walk through this with you. Feel free to use it. Number one question I ask them over the phone is how long have you been pushing a manual wheelchair? CMS will not cover this device unless they've at least been pushing for a year. So if that's not there, then you can pause right there and consider other therapies. What difficulties do you have pushing your wheelchair now? What's the root of that? Is it endurance? Is it pain? Is it function? Can you not get places fast enough to complete your activities of daily living? Those types of questions. Do you have pain with pushing your wheelchair? I encourage you in your documentation to consider that 24-hour period. What's your pain like when you wake up? What is it, mid to late morning, noon, afternoon, evening? Have you begun to take pain medicine to deal with your pain? Have you stopped doing the activities because of pain? Have you begun to have to ask for help because of your pain? All those things can help you paint a picture of your individual person, and as a reviewer, please do that. Tell your reviewer about your individual client and how this is impacting them, because they've read all of the bullet point reasons, but they want to know about your patient. So what activities of daily living has this affected? And those questions about the pain came from Boninger's article from 2005. And I thought they were very good functional pain questions. The fourth question we ask is, has your pain gotten so bad you've gone to the doctor about it? This is one of my favorite questions because they're going to write your goals for you. Everybody would love that, right? If you had this PowerAssist device right now, how would it help you? What would it allow you to do that you cannot do right now? and then turn it. If you don't get it, how's that going to change things for you? And then why would you like to have this power assist instead of just a full-blown power chair? And then the last one is, are you willing to come in for a trial? These devices are expensive and they take the work to do, but you want to know if it's what they're actually looking for and if it really is going to meet their goals. So these are 8 questions I think have been good to go through. That if they help you, we're glad to share those. So where do you start? You've brought them in for the evaluation. We're just going to run through a few things just kind of specific to the need for power assist here. You want to know what their goals are for themselves, not our goals for them, not our desires. What are their daily activities? Where do they go? What do they do? And how do they do it? Do they drive a vehicle? And if so, do they have the need to load and unload the wheelchair themselves? And then where do they use the device? Where do they go and what do they do? And I kind of call it the 80% rule. You know, where are you spending 80% of your time? Sure, we travel maybe once or twice a year, or you go to the mountains once a year. Let's don't get a wheelchair for the mountains if you only go once a year. Let's come back to where you're spending the majority of your time. And then looking at doing a good mat assessment of postural evaluation. And when you do that muscle test, key in on those muscles at risk and cite the sources where that comes from. And do a really good job of indicating muscle imbalance, because that also we know is a risk factor. And then utilize that screening tool that we shared with you a minute ago. Some objective measures you can use, the functional reach in sitting or standing, and then the functional pain assessment. Again, where we talk about the 24-hour pain 7 days a week throughout the month, and not just that, my pain is 6 out of 10 right now. That doesn't tell them a whole lot about how it's affected their daily life. So I bring you back to this humbling slide and highlighting these key muscles that I hope, if anything you take away, you'll go back and test these to see if your person is a good candidate. So just a few reminders about the good postural assessment on the mat and supine and sitting to rule out whether it's fixed or flexible, and how someone sits, because we again go back to our clinical practice guidelines that encourage us to look at that from an evidence-based angle, that we need to address their postural positioning in the chair. This is a postural balance test you can use also as part of your test and documentation to indicate their position in the chair. Treatment for repetitive strain injury, you know, just the chair is not always it. Remember, think about the big picture. Potentially just addressing their posture in the chair could be enough. And looking at strengthening and neuromuscular reeducation. Manual therapy, and we work beside great therapists that do great work in that area. Exercise programs, which I don't know how many of your people are really doing that on a daily basis, but probably not as many as we would like to think, and addressing that. And then again, one aspect we're going to focus in on today to address the repetitive strain injuries is a compensatory joint protection using power assist products. So we're going to go through each of the manufacturers and products and go through their various aspects with the hopes that we get the right product to the right patient with their specific goals. So Mary, take it away.
So as we're looking at the power assist products, the ones that are currently on the market, there are 4 of them. And so one of them works very different than the other 2. And so we want to really just be mindful of that just because they're in the same category doesn't mean that they're all equal for that particular client. And so as we're looking at it, we're looking at Pushrim activated power assist wheels, where you actually push on the hand rim and it helps to amplify, if you will, each push, versus a different product such as the power add-on system, the Smart Drive, where what you're doing with that is you're actually, with the newest version, the MX2 Plus, you're actually tapping with a wristband and that initiates the motion, and you're more than just steering the product. So you're not necessarily pushing repeatedly. And so it's just really important for us to understand that it's 2 different technologies. So why are we looking at this? Because it is that middle product for people. It's another option for wheelchair users to really help them navigate all their environments of use. And so when we're looking at the Pushrim activated power assist products that are out there, all of them have some kind of wheels. They have some kind of battery power that's giving it the power, if you will. There's mounting hardware as well, and there may be some other components on the chair that we'll get into. And so what happens is when each person pushes with the different products, it gives a different amount of amplification, if you will, to each push. And so some of them assist at like a 40% level. You can adjust the actual assistance level on some of the products as well, up to 50 and 80%, just to understand it. So the technology is just, for the Pushrim activated power assist, is amplifying the force. And what's so beneficial about these products for our clients, it feeds into those clinical practice guidelines, right? We really want to decrease the stroke frequency, how many pushes they're constantly doing all day long. And it really decreases the force required for their pushing. And overall, it significantly just decreases the strain on the whole upper extremity, including the shoulder. So some considerations when we're looking at the Pushrim activated power assist technology, they're great products, but, and what's so great about them is, as opposed to a power wheelchair, somebody can use a car for transportation. The issue is they need somebody to actually load these wheels in and out of the car, simply because of the weight of the wheels and just the amount of strain necessary to take them on and off of the wheelchair. So the Pushrim activated power assist products are not really for a person to be loading and unloading in and out of the car by themselves. And so that's one big consideration. The other is that you just don't get in it and start pushing. There's actually a learning curve to the pushing. You have to like feel it, and it's kind of like a little bit of a coordination, learning the actual, how much pressure is required to steer it and to actually move it forward on just different environments. So if you're in the exhibit hall trying these, just be mindful of that. You know, it's hard at first sometimes to get it to go straight because there is that little bit of a learning curve. But you're just really trying to encourage for people to just use a lot less force than they're used to for pushing. And a major consideration is that all the products are different. There are pros and cons to each of them. And it's really about getting the client to try each of the products so they can feel for themselves which one would better meet their particular needs. So again, for the Pushrim activated products, we have the Alber, which is the motion wheels, and the Twion wheels that are out there. Sunrise Medical has the Xtender. And now Yamaha, which has made the Xtender for Sunrise, now has their own product that they've refined a little more called the Navi 1. So all of these products are in the exhibit hall if you have any interest in learning more about them, but also the manufacturer reps for most of the products are here today, and they actually brought the products into this room. So if you want to look at some of them after, just to be able to compare and contrast them a little bit, feel free to come up at the end of the presentation. So the other power assist product that's in that category is the it's really Permobil's Max Mobility Smart Drive. And so that's undergone several iterations over the last few years, and now we're up to the MX2 Plus version. And that's the product where you start it right now with a push tracker, with an activity monitor, if you will, on your wrist. And the tap-tap motion, whether it's on the wheel or on the side of the person's leg, et cetera, will initiate the actual turn on the motor, and it'll go at a set speed, whatever you have the speed set at. And the person who's in the chair just needs to kind of steer it and just be very aware of what's happening with the environment in front of them. So for all of these products, they're taking a manual wheelchair and turning it into a power type product. And what's important to note about that is you want to make sure that the frame can handle the forces and the different environments that are now coming at the chair at a much faster rate and with a lot more force. So some considerations with that when we're looking at the different wheelchairs are, some of the manufacturers actually will make a frame that is power adaptable. So they feel it's a little more reinforced to be able to withstand the forces of putting a power product on the chair itself. And other things that are important to consider is what is the size of that front wheel, the caster? Because if the chair is just doing a constant motion, it's easy for a small wheel to get stuck in a crack in the sidewalk or in a pothole, and the person can easily go flying out of the chair. So you want to just be mindful of, okay, what is the size of that caster? And also, what is the material that caster is made of? So a lot of times the composite wheels may not be able to handle the forces that are coming at it from the power products. And you may want to consider an aluminum hub for the casters of the chair. So if we just take a few minutes and go into each of the actual products and just learn a little bit more about their some of the advantages and disadvantages, then we're going to bring it back together and then do some case studies to help apply it a little more. So all of the products that are the Pushrim activated power chairs, they have an attachment through an axle pin. And so that's how the wheel gets attached to the chair. So it's the same type of on-off attachment removal method for putting it on and off and loading it and unloading it in and out of a chair or disassembling the car, or disassembling the actual chair itself. But the weight of it is what's so different, and that there's actually different hardware that's on the chair to accommodate these axles. So just to be aware of that. And so you charge it just like you'd be charging anything on the Emotion wheels, it's through the hub on the battery. And just to know that their batteries happen to be lithium-ion batteries. And the claim is that they'll go 15.5 miles per charge. And so with the Emotion wheels, what's advantageous about their product is that they have an ECS system. So it's a remote control that you're controlling the wheels with when it's in the full version, the Emotion. And basically it has an indoor and an outdoor mode. And what's nice about that is somebody could set the speed and the performance for their different environments. And so a typical thing that we'll do in the clinic is that inside, you kind of want the chair to stop a lot sharper, the braking to be sharper. So we'll have the braking a little sharper for indoors so people don't go running into their refrigerator and their stove and stuff like that when they're in their home. But outdoors, one of the nice features of these wheels is that when you take your hands off the hand rim, it'll still coast a little bit. And so we may have the braking set at a different level there so that it will coast. And it helps people then in terms of getting up and down, say, inclines, mostly going up inclines. So it gives them a chance to get their hands back on the hand rim, and the chair will keep the momentum going forward for them. So that's what's so nice about having the two different modes. Another advantage to the ECS module is you can do troubleshooting with it. If there's a problem, you can start running through it. If you call Alber over the phone, you'll get some codes, so you can troubleshoot it a little yourself and sometimes just reset what needs to be reset. Some other great adjustability with the Alber is also you have some hand rim sensitivity. So you have an electronic parameter for that, but also there's a dial on the actual hand rim where you can adjust the sensitivity, and it'll turn for like 12 different settings, if you will. And with the electronics, you can actually adjust the amount of power it's helping you with. So you can set it at 60%, say for indoors, and 80% for outdoors, which is really, you can also set the braking and the acceleration with it, which is pretty nice depending on what somebody's needs are. A big thing is helping people get up the steep van ramp. And how do you just play with those settings a little bit. So they also have a feature called a hill holder that the person will just hold down the button and it'll come on, and they'll see the little H on the screen, and this way they can, it'll help them in terms of giving them a little bit of a stop, if you will, so they can get their hands back in position to keep pushing up the ramp or an incline smoothly. There's also a locking capability to their remote as well. The speed is almost 4 miles an hour, but it's pretty fast and very functional for people when they're indoors and outdoors, because it really does meet like most fast walking speeds, even my own. And so the other great feature about the the Alber product is that they have this jack-up anti-tipper. I don't know how many people have seen that. Well, it's on the chair that's up here, and what's so advantageous about it is that when you're taking off the wheel, it can hold the chair up a little bit, so it makes it easier for you to take off this 22-pound wheel. And so it's good to know that that even exists, and that's a big feature, I would think, of their tippers. That's the ECS module that Kathy's holding as well, just so people can see it. So biggest concern is the 22-pound wheel, and just to be aware of that. Another great feature, so both of the Alber products can go in almost any wheelchair. So just to be aware of that. So when you're looking at the different ultralight chairs, you can really have a person dialed into their particular chair, whatever manufacturer it is, and then this product can be added to most of those manufacturers. And the Twion works very similar to the Emotion wheel, only that it's actually a set type of power. So you don't get to program it and adjust it, but it does have like an active mode and a sport mode and an active mode, if you will. The major advantage to the Twion over the other products is that the wheels are much lighter. They're only 13 pounds. And so even though they're only 13 pounds, it's still a very awkward product for somebody to put in and out, to take on and off of the chair by themselves and to load it in and out of a car. So just because it's lighter doesn't mean it's possible for them to put it in and out of the car. They had an iPhone app that they've been working on with it, and so that's not available at the moment, but there are people who are using it out there if they've already had it. Another advantage to the Twion is that the speed of is probably the fastest power assist out there at 6 miles an hour. And you saw the same anti-tipper that's there with it. And again, just some of the concerns with it is that you don't have the programmability with these wheels like you do with the actual Emotion. And so if you have somebody with tetraplegia, you may be looking more toward the Emotion product simply because you can do a little bit more with the actual settings. And I think that Alber also is advocating this product, the Twion, primarily for people with paraplegia. So just to be aware of that as well.
And they're 13 pounds apiece.
Yes,
the wheels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So another product that's out there is the Sunrise Medical, the Xtender. And that has the same type of setup in terms of putting it on and off the chair. And the difference is that you can also have nickel batteries as opposed to the lithium-ion batteries. And just to be mindful, there's a slight difference in weight and cost with those. The speed, they don't really have it measured, but it's probably around an average of 4 miles an hour as well. What's so nice about the Xtender is that it has a downhill speed control. So when you're going down a ramp, it kind of holds the chair a little bit back, if you will. And that's very comforting for a lot of people who they don't want it to accelerate when they're going down because they're afraid they're not going to have control. That's especially important on, say, if they're coming in and out of their own van and descending the ramp, because it gets pretty hairy at times. And the other feature they have is a rollback prevention, which is very helpful as well. So the user often feels a lot more control with the Xtender wheel. I think the weight of the wheels is still up there, not as heavy as the Emotion, but it's still about 18 pounds. The difference with the 17.5 to 18.5 is because of the difference in the batteries that are available. One consideration or concern with the Xtender is that it's only available on the quickie wheelchairs because they're putting that product out. So it's only available on Sunrise Medical products. And there's no real programmability with it for people's specific needs. Lastly, with this Sunrise Medical, with the Xtender, it actually, if you are using it and you're using it in more quiet environments, like in an office, in your home, et cetera, you'll hear a humming to the noise, to the actual motor. So just to be aware that that's on there as well. And there's a separate on-off switch. The battery for this, the battery is actually a separate component as well. So just to know when you're putting it on and off, it's a little tricky to try to maneuver the three parts, the battery piece, the on-off switch, and then the wheel as well as you're maneuvering it back into position on the chair. So Yamaha is out in the exhibit hall, and they've been increasing their presence over the last year in the US and in Canada with the wheel they're calling the Navi 1. And so it's the same pretty much as what you've been exposed to with the Xtender. So if you know the Xtender, you definitely know the Navi 1, but they've made a lot of upgrades to it. So just to be aware of it. And it can go on different manufacturer wheelchairs, but you have to really call them to talk about it because there's a question about the camber tube and the hardware to integrate it to the camber tube technology, where if it's the axle plate itself, the axle plate technology like you see on, say, a key mobility chair or on the folding chair or a Quickie 2 type chair, it'll easily go on to that type of mounting. And so just to be aware of that. So still working on integrating into all the different manufacturer chairs. The speed of it's 4 miles an hour as well. And there's a lot more programmability now that you can do with the actual Navi 1. And so unlike the emotion programming or any of the other wheels, where the wheels pretty much have the same setup for the most part, both wheels together and they act in unison, the Navi 1 can be programmed with each wheel doing something a little different. So if somebody has, say, hemiplegia or something, or some weakness and more weakness in one limb than the other upper extremity, you can kind of balance that out, if you will, with the programming of the Navi 1. And I haven't gotten a chance to play with it yet, but so a lot of this is coming from just talking to the manufacturer reps. So this is the only product I haven't really worked with at all, but it's nice to see the advances that the product has made and that they're bringing it into the US market. And so similar to the Xtender, it has the downhill speed control, the rollback prevention, the uphill ascent assist. And what's different about the Navi 1 is they also have like a side slope stability control. So if somebody, and most people who are maneuvering on sidewalks, you're kind of like sideways on the sidewalks because they're all sloped for drainage. And you always have to push a little harder with one wheel than the other. Well, this helps to correct a little bit for that. So that's very helpful. And they have some smart tune software that seems to have a lot of program adjustability and troubleshooting capabilities. So some considerations, it's still the same assembly, disassembly, and the weight of the wheels. So we've talked about these power assist, the Pushrim activated power assist products, and that they'd really take away the frequency of the push and the amount of force that people need to push. And so now we're going to switch to the other type of product that's in that power assist category and still considered power assist, but the difference again is that it is it's helping in terms of decreasing the stroke frequency, how many times you're pushing. So again, with the newest version, which is the MX2 Plus, it's operated through an activity monitor, the push tracker, that's our wristband, and you can adjust the settings on this wristband in terms of how responsive the tap is and how much power the system has, et cetera. And what you do is you turn it on, and it's like a latch system. It'll stay on until you turn it off. And so what's tricky about that is it's not intuitive. And so I think the number one thing I tell people when we start to look at getting them to try this product is how do you stop it? And so that's so important because it's not intuitive to tap, tap. It's intuitive, they get too close to something and they grab the wheels and they start to forget what to do. So you have to remind them to tap, tap. So I think that's a bit of a learning curve with the wheels. And then also making sure that they fully turn the system off when they're in tighter environments of use, such as in a restaurant or in their home. When they're in their home in, like, say, the bathroom situation, you want to make sure that they're fully turning off the system so that when they're doing something with, like, reaching for the faucet or reaching for a product in the medicine cabinet, it doesn't interpret the quick motion as 2 taps and turn the system on, because that actually happens to many people. And so that's a little about the smart drive and the way it works. So there's a lot of people still using it in its previous version, which was the MX2 version. And how that worked is that you actually push the hand rim and you give it a certain amount of force, and once you can initiate the push with a certain level of force, then it'll stay on until you're turning it off. So just to appreciate that that does work a little differently, and you can have it set up with either the MX2 Plus or the 2 technology. So you're not necessarily tied into using the tapping for the motion, just to be aware of that. And so what's interesting with the smart drive is just making sure that people are still paying a lot of attention to the environment and they're watching where they're maneuvering. So I'm finding a lot for new users, it can get really hairy with them because they can get distracted and they don't necessarily know their normal wheelchair skills, like to be leaning back when they're going over certain bumps in the sidewalk, et cetera, or curb cuts, and they can easily put themselves in an unsafe situation. So you just want to be really mindful of that to make sure we're still doing all the normal wheelchair skills training with people to make sure they're as safe as possible. And the major advantage to the smart drive is the weight. So now it's similar weight to that Twion wheel, but the difference is that it's in a completely different shape. So if you see it here, it's almost like I call it a large dustbuster for people, so they can appreciate. So it's very different in terms of putting this now in and out of a car. And so what we can do, this type of product will enable a client who needs to use a car and drives from a car to be able to load and unload the product, the power assist product, and the wheelchair without really putting their shoulders at significant risk. And so you saw how easy it was for me to take that off and on. And just to understand how it does work, it also works with Bluetooth technology. And so the recommendation is to use it on the right if you have the wristband, the push tracker, to make sure it's on the right hand because the Bluetooth in the unit's actually a little more toward the right side. And so they have an app that's now available, the Smart Evaluation app, so just to be aware that that's out there. And really is a great resource for people, not only for the clients themselves, but for us as clinicians and for the ATPs that are out there. And it talks a lot about its use. They have different videos on there so you can appreciate how it's being used out in different environments, if you will. And some information on how do you improve, like say, the training of people when they get it, so that they're as safe as possible. And they do have now an over-the-air upgrade update access, which is pretty cool. So another point about the smart drive is that they have buttons, throttle buttons. So for the people who like that button technology, where they hit a button to turn it on and off, as opposed to having the wristband, the activity monitor type band on, then it's available, and now it's a momentary switch. So just to be aware of that's out there. So biggest advantage to this different technology is that you can put it, the user themselves can now put a power assist product in and out of a car by themselves. And again, as with all of them, there's definitely a propulsion technique learning curve, and we do want to make sure people are still learning the basic wheelchair skills. So these are just the different technologies, and I just wanted to, I think one of our biggest points today is just for everyone to just appreciate how they're just completely different applications, if you will. And when we are seeing people in the clinic, we try to tease out which one would be a little bit more appropriate for them based on their different environments of use and what they have in their lifestyle in terms of using a van versus a car for transport, et cetera. And so you're always wondering, okay, so which products work best for people with paraplegia or people with just upper limb strain that need to really start protecting their joints? Or which products are essential almost for people pushing manual wheelchairs who have tetraplegia? Because what do we know about tetraplegia is the upper limb is not fully innervated. So because of this imbalance, you know the act of pushing is going to really compromise even a normally innervated arm, if you will. But now you have muscles that are there's a lot of asymmetry with muscles there, and that's a major concern. So it sets people up for problems right away. But on top of it, people are using their arms for all these different other activities. And so we're really trying to make sure that we protect their upper limbs as much as possible so they can continue functioning and doing all their ADLs without pain, hopefully. And so unfortunately, it's not the case for most of our clients who are using wheelchairs. And if you talk and look at some of the studies, I mean, the incidence of shoulder pain and just upper limb pain can be up as high as 90-something%, which is pretty horrendous because these clients don't get a break, get an opportunity to rest their hands like we do, or their arms, if you will. And so what we want to do now is just go into the case studies just to help tie all this together, if you will.
As you can see, each device had a little bit something different about it. So going back to what was your client's really primary need and primary goal, and when you bring them in for the trial, being able to help them discern their biggest need. So I want to tell you about CJ. CJ was injured in 2012 and it resulted in a T6 spinal cord injury. He's married, he's a 6th grade teacher of all things. I would put me in a wheelchair too, I think, teaching 6th graders. He's also working on a master's at the time. He was having some right shoulder pain that he gave a score of 6 out of 10. His primary reason for referral was I need a new back and cushion. The chair wasn't maybe 2 or 3 years old. So that was the reason he came. So even with just that seating, we're gonna do a mat eval, take a look at posture and range of motion and sort of revisit his functional abilities. So as you can see there, what his gross strength was in range of motion. Oh, there we go. And postural findings. He wears a TLSO throughout the day just to support his posture, give him full contact. And he was independent from the manual wheelchair level. He drives, he loads his wheelchair in and out of the car, an active young man. So like I said, he came needing modifications to his seating. This is sort of the system he was in, a 3-year-old rigid frame, K5 manual wheelchair, a gel-based cushion, and sort of a deep contour back. His issues were poor postural support, some broken hardware. He had gained a little weight and began to have shoulder pain. So we spent a little more time talking about the shoulder pain. When does it hurt? What's causing it to hurt? What have you stopped doing? All those questions from that screening evaluation. And after we talked a little further and looked further at his independence and kind of what he's doing, we brought up, have you considered power assist technology? He's independent with a weight shift, but he's a young man and he's got a long way to go. So we brought him in for a trial, and again, as a reviewer for a funder, that is a much stronger case to approve a device like this when a trial has been done and a successful trial was done in a variety of environments, kind of basically proving that it worked. So our goal was to provide a device to him to decrease the repetitive strain injury in his upper extremities that had already begun. So we did do a trial in a variety of products, the Pushrim Assist and the Power Assist or Power Add-on product, and he ended up doing much better with the Smart Drive Power Add-on, and I'll show you a video in a minute of why. He had, again, worked in a school, long hallways, long parking lots, and he still had the strength to load it and unload it himself in his vehicle. So this is CJ after we had addressed his back and cushion and fit in his wheelchair. And I have a video of him. Let's see, can you guys play that? There we go. Of him using that at school, doing a great job of educating our future. And as you can see, he's not even pushing. He activated it by the 2 taps. He's cruising along and doing the primary goal of reducing that frequency and that intensity of pushing that hand rim throughout his day. You saw, we kind of call it making a power turn down the hallway, just pressing into that hand rim, veering, and he's able to go a really long way with just one push to get started and one to stop. So it turned out to be a very effective device for him. It minimized his pain medication he was taking, allowed him to do more of his functional activities, and he had the ability to load it and unload it in his car. So I think Mary's going to tell you about Patrick.
All right. So Patrick is a person I've worked with for about 20 years, off and on, to help him just get different wheelchairs as his needs have changed. And he's lives on the Upper East Side, very involved in his kids' activities, etc. and needs to do a lot of outdoor and indoor propulsion. So he works full-time, is independent with all of his ADLs at a wheelchair level, and he sits pretty upright with his posture. So his posture is pretty ideal, and he sees me primarily for his posture and for like the seating system in the chair, as well as setting up the manual chair itself. And so the other thing that's really important for us when somebody's is looking at like a manual chair versus a power chair is how can you do a pressure relief, and can you do an independent pressure relief by yourself? And so he was fortunate to get some triceps back, so he can do a push-up pressure relief, and he can also do a full forward lean as a pressure relief as well to minimize the strain on the shoulders. So here he is, and this is just a picture of his home, of his environment in his home, where he has hallways like this that twist and turn a little bit to get you know, in and out of his apartment. And also in his work building as well, there are long hallways that are carpeted, et cetera. So he was finding it really tough to keep pushing with standard wheels. So he went out and he bought the Smart Drive product. Everybody's talking about it. It's very sexy. It does a lot of great things. And so he tried it, and he was not as satisfied with how it was helping him with all of his mobility, because it didn't work as well in his different environments of use. And so when we started to look at it, so I went and met up with him, and we were just talking about how he's using the different products. And what happens is, in his life, he doesn't want to wear wheelchair gloves, right? Because he's constantly in and out of inside, outside, so he needs the product to be working with him. But he also wants to be able to, you know, reach across the table and do things without having gloves on. And so just the act of taking off and on gloves can be tricky for a person with tetraplegia. So that was a big thing for him, and probably one of the reasons that the Smart Drive then didn't end up being the better product for him, because he needed to use gloves with it. The other is that actually when he was moving, there's a lot of like accelerations and decelerations in his movement. And you can see, like looking at the hallway and all, and when you're coming down a curb cut, et cetera, that you actually, for him, the set speed wasn't ideal for him. And so when we really went back to the drawing board, I ended up recommending a pair of the Emotion wheels after he tried it. And he absolutely loves them because of what they can do for him. So you can see in the video here, it's just a quick clip, but you can see how he's coming out of his building here, and he's just pushing, and you can see it's not a lot of effort for him. He just he turns on the, he opens his van, coming down the curb cut. And so for him, those constant, you know, you can see the acceleration and deceleration. And then here he is, you know, you're facing traffic, want to get in really quick into the van. And so those sharp turns, the Smart Drive just didn't work as well for him with. And so that's, I think, one of the biggest differences between the Smart Drive type product and the other Pushrim activated power assist products is the person's control over the acceleration and deceleration, like little nuances that you don't always appreciate until you're the one using until you're actually seeing it in the different environments of use. And so for him, fortunately, we were able to get through his insurance the funding for the power assist wheels, because, as I said, for the Smart Drive itself, he went out and bought it himself because it looks so cool. And so just looking at all these power assist products, the hardest thing for all of us is to document and to explain to an insurance company why they need to pay the $6,000, $7,000 for these products. So what is it doing for our clients? So these are some typical justifications that most of you are all familiar with. But just to remind ourselves, okay, not only is it helping in terms of decreasing the force, decreasing the frequency, helping minimize people's risk for repetitive strain injuries, but also documenting and acknowledging what's going on with their heart rate and the oxygen consumption. Because a lot of our clients who have MS or a spinal cord injury, et cetera, there's also a difference in terms of their lung capacity, if you will. And so it's important to acknowledge that when you're also justifying. And just being mindful that the whole point of any of these mobility products is to maximize somebody's ability to participate and do in all their environments of use. So on carpet, on grass, all that type of stuff. And that's the beauty of a lot of these power assist products. They enable a client client who can't do that with a standard manual wheelchair to now be able to do it with their mobility product and be more involved. So with the funding and the documentation, you always just want to make sure you're always being very specific to your particular client, as opposed to using some of the canned phrases. And why is it going to make a difference? And like Kathy said with the eval, ask them, because they're their best advocate. And so they're the ones telling you why they want it. So you want to make sure we're including that in there. And that really helps in terms of like a reviewer and justification. The other is just being mindful that for certain funding sources, like Medicare to fund this, that the person has to be using a manual wheelchair for a year before you can get the power, you can recommend a Power Assist product. So it's a waste of time to do it with the Medicare funding if they're not using the wheelchair for at least a year. Other funding sources will approve it much sooner, and sometimes even for new users, often for new users, I should say. So it's just important to be aware of that. And you always want to talk about why somebody isn't going to use the power wheelchair. Why don't they want a wheelchair and a power wheelchair, and what would it do in terms of limiting their ability to function? And so a lot of times people wouldn't be able to do the transportation with their families. They wouldn't be able to get into friends and family members' homes, et cetera. So it's important to remember that when we're looking at the justification and include some of that. So these are some of our resources. We just wanted to make sure the websites were up there for everybody. We will have the slides posted. And we also have a bunch of references there just to help just give some literature support to what we're doing, and to make sure you can use that as well in the letters of medical necessity or however you're justifying your equipment. A big thing we also do, and Kathy does as well, is use a lot of the clinical practice guidelines and helping to reference that for insurance companies with the documentation to really maximize our chance of getting it approved on the first go around. And so
I guess we have time for a couple of questions. If we can see you.
it's blinding here, so
Yes.
we can't really see. Is there something?
And if you, yeah, go ahead.
So the first question is, in some of our work, are we familiar with an optimal caster size? And so the answer is no. I mean, of course, the bigger the caster is, but there's a lot more that goes into a caster decision. So I would say a 5, a 6, or a 6-inch caster would kind of be that sweet spot, if you will, for people, where the 4-inch with the smart drive can get a little tricky if the person doesn't have good wheelchair skills. But if they do have good wheelchair skills and they're very comfortable with leaning back and allowing the chair to perform and pop that little bit in the front, then the 4 would be fine for them. So I would say if you're looking at it, 4, 5, or 6 would probably be that ideal range. And it depends on the person's skills as well. And your second question? So the question is there an increase in incidence of, like, say, component or frame damage with Power Assist products? And I don't know of any study that supports that, but I think that from clinical practice experience that we do notice that components don't hold up as well, like the plastic wheels, depending on where people are using their Power Assist product. And so for the casters, we tend to really see some damage with that. That's probably the biggest issue I see with the Power Assist products. How about yourself?
And I would just say, when you go by the exhibit hall and interact with the manufacturers, ask them those questions, how they are developing their products to minimize that and how they're communicating with the manufacturers of the wheelchairs to minimize that as well, keeping that discussion going. Yeah, I'm not aware of backrest failure so much.
Yeah, no, so I'm not aware of either of any back. You mean like the hardware on the back support? The seat to back hardware, like here? Okay. So, no, I'm not aware of any failure with that either due to this use of power assist wheels. But I don't know if, yes, I'm not aware of it. Doesn't mean it's not happening, but it's not a point where of contact, if you will, with the forces from the environment as much.
And do one more. Can you use the microphone so it's on the recording?
Well, I'll speak loud.
There you go.
I haven't seen recently a drastic incidence of breakage. I know initially Ty was a little bit tentative with their stainless steel frames, and it may have been because of the material that they were looking at possible cracking with the power devices. But as this becomes more mainstream, the manufacturers are gearing up for it, it seems. But you still have to ask the question.
You do.
My question is that with the PAPAWS, you still retain a passive motion of pushing the wheelchairs. Is this an advantage to some individuals as opposed to using the power adder, which they're more sedentary?
So I think that people who are using wheelchairs, I mean, we know that just using all the upper limb overuse is a major concern. So anything we can do to give them a break is huge. The question is, how is the break? Is there any advantage to some gentle motion there? And I don't think we can honestly say, but there's so much motion their upper limbs are getting on a daily basis that I don't, anything we could do, I would say, to give them a break is very helpful.
We'll be up here for a little bit.
And then, sorry, one more thing. You were saying about the tie with the frames. So with the titanium frames from Tie Light and the aluminum frames, they will use the power adaptable. They do have that component to make them power adaptable so that they have a little bit more, from what I understand, the walls of the actual tubing is slightly thicker.
Yeah, there is reinforcing in the frames, and you had to ask for that up front.
Right, and so the comment is that you have to ask for that up front, which is important to note. The other manufacturers don't feel the need to reinforce the frame. So it's important to make that point as well.
And the manufacturer of these products are here, so if you guys would come on up, and then if you have questions specifically for them, they are here, and they're also in the exhibit hall. And we want to thank you for your time and attention.